to the Effective Line Managers Toolkit workshop. Today, we are going to be addressing a couple of very important leadership questions. We're going to be looking at what leadership is. We're going to be looking at why it is important. And we're going to be looking at what is required to lead effectively in an organization and how you can develop effective leadership in the workplace. My name is Idoku Godwin Ogala. I am the speaker for today's session. Why is leadership important, and why is it essential that we have a webinar like this? John Maxwell said, the better you lead, the better the organization you will build, and the more results you will achieve. And so your leadership lead determines the limit of your success, and the best leaders will build the best businesses. In Jim Collins' book, The Good to Great Organizations, the first factor he spoke to was the level 5 type of leader. And he said that was the first key to making organizations make the journey from a good to a great company. And that is why the subject of leadership and the development of leadership is critical. And if you look around our nations today, you would also agree with me that it takes exceptional leadership to lead great nations. And so beyond, we said earlier that you look at it in 2 dimensions, but now you begin to even think of it in 3 dimensions, that at an individual level, at an organizational level, and at a national level, or at a global level, leadership is at the heart of development. Leadership is at the heart of success. Leadership is at the heart of effectiveness. And so leadership is an attribute we all want to cultivate, we all want to build, and we all want to develop. And the question of are leaders born, or leaders made, has always been out there. And through several debates, it's been concluded that, of course, a lot of leaders, by reason of certain traits and characteristics and behavior, are taught or are seen to be born. However, when it became clear that leadership is just a collection of behaviors and attributes that can actually be learned and replicated, then it became clear that everyone has a chance and a shot at leadership. So we can say that leaders are not only born, but they can also be made. And so everyone, speaking to the subject of the importance of leadership. And earlier we talked about what leadership is. And we said leadership is simply influence, right? Like John Maxwell said. But beyond that, leadership as a concept comes across as the concept of love. Love is a multi-dimensional concept. You say love is patient, kind, and all of those attributes. And then it comes as an effect on the person that is loved. In the same way, leadership is a multi-dimensional concept that also comes across to the person that is being led as an influence. And so you can say that in leadership, you have relationships, you have interactions, and then, of course, the output, which is what? Which is influence. So what that means is that before there can be leadership, there must definitely be a relationship between one person and another. And that's why it's been widely said that if you think you are leading and there is no one following, then you are just taking a walk. So in leadership, the first critical element for leadership to exist is relationship. There must be a relationship. And now in that relationship, the second critical dimension of leadership is the fact that there must be an interaction. Okay, so between the leader and the led, there must be some form of interaction. And there's a theory called the LMX theory. We'll look at that later, all right, that speaks about the critical elements of that interaction. And then the third thing, of course, is the effect of that interaction on the person or the individual being led. And that's what we call the influence. So John Maxwell was right to have said that leadership is influence, but that is only speaking to the outcome of leadership. All right. For you to have the outcome, you must have these necessary conditions, which is a relationship and then an interaction. And it's in breaking down those three critical elements that we begin to find out the factors that enables one individual to wield influence over others. And so it's important that those elements are studied. And so many research has been carried out around the subject of relationships and, of course, around the dimension of interaction. And a lot of it are in a lot of our learning programs, But, and of course, we'll see some of them in the course of this webinar. And so we're looking at why is leadership important. So we said that leadership is important because of three critical reasons, or if to see the importance of leadership, you can look at it from three key dimensions. One is at the individual level, the second is at the organizational level, and the third is at maybe a global level or a national level. We say to people that life, the system of life is divided into 5 layers. We call them the levels or circles of welfare, right? Circles of care. And we say there is the family, the circle, the level of the family. And we say there is the level of the community. And then we say there is the level of the company. And then we say there's the level of the nation. And then, of course, the globe. So there are levels of care, But interestingly, every level of care has leaders that make sure things happen. So for the home, at the level of care, which is the primary level of care, you have the man, the wife, that form the leaders at that level. And then at the community level, and in the community, of course, you have various elements. So you could have the church community, you could have the community's leadership. So if you live in an estate, for example, you probably have the chairman of the estate, So it is leadership at that level, and everything. And the essence of leaders at every level is to provide and to protect. All right. And then if you go on and then of course you also have the church community within that level, and then you have the pastors and the clergies and the imams and all the other forms of leaders that help to provide and to protect at those levels. And then if you go higher to the national level or the country level, let's call it the country level, you have the local government, and then you have the state, and then you have the nation. And so you have the local government chairman, and you have the state governors, and then you have the presidents, leaders at those various levels, and various type of leaders leading sub-sectors or sections of those at that level or at that layer or circle of care. And then if you go higher to the globe, at the global level, you also have the World Health Organization, the United Nations, and we have people organized in such a way that can also provide care at that level. So we find out that leadership is essential at every level of care. And of course, if you come to the organization too, that's one level of care, but the third level of care. You have things organized in such a way that you also have the CEO, the MDs, and on top of the CEO and the MDs, you also have the board of directors. And so that leaders also at every level to provide, to protect, to keep things structured and organized so that there's effectiveness and there is impact. So you find that there is leadership at every level of care in society. And that's what makes our world go round. But I was saying, why is it important that we understand leadership? At an individual level, you as an individual, first of all, need to lead yourself. We say there are 3 types of leadership: self-leadership, private leadership, personal leadership, private leadership, and then public leadership. So it's first of all is for you to have mastery of yourself and lead yourself effectively, which is key for personal success. And beyond that is then the need for you to be able to lead the circle of care in which you belong. So if you are a father, if you are a mother, if you are an MD, if you are the CEO, if you are a manager, that's in a country, I mean, in a company, or you are the president of a country. So you find out that, again, you need leadership beyond leading yourself effectively and having personal success. You then need leadership to lead your circle of care, because every human being would eventually have to lead a particular circle of care at every point in time. So growing up as a child, you are under a circle of care, and then you are a follower. But then the moment you move out of your developmental years, which is the years between 0 and 20 years, and you begin to move into your productive years, the years between 25 to 40, you begin to assume leadership, both at different levels of care. So whether it's at a family level where you get married and you begin to assume leadership of an individual, and then you have children and you begin to assume leadership of them, or you begin to work in an organization and then you begin to grow in the ranks, and then you begin to assume leadership, team leadership, and all of that. So leadership is a critical skill for survival and also for contributing to society. All right, it's leadership should actually be treated like oxygen. It should not be an optional thing. However, followership also provides for, it's very, very critical. Like, in fact, they even say that for you to lead, you must first of all be a follower. But you follow eventually to lead. All right, growth. The sign that you are growing is that you begin to assume leadership responsibilities over others, and you begin to contribute effectively to the various circles of care or the levels of care in society. So leadership is important at 3 levels. 1, at an individual level. Secondly, at the company business level. And the third is the organizational level. And that's what John Maxwell was saying to us earlier. And that's what Jim Collins also said, in that quote. So what should then be our response to these things? If leadership is okay, then we all must learn to lead. We all must understand what leadership is, and we must all learn to lead. Okay? For those who know me and those who don't, my own leadership journey, and just to manage expectations, like I said, there are several levels of care. So we're not going to dwell on trying to understand leadership at the different levels of care. Leadership in the home has, while there are common factors among all the various types of leadership, whether family leadership or company leadership or public leadership and all of that, there are also shades of differences, which is why the concentration and the focus will be on business leadership, will be about professional leadership, right? Leading as a career, all right, and not necessarily leadership, public leadership in government and all of that. But we might just take examples or use some of examples from those ends, especially when we're speaking to themes that are similar to them. But we will not dwell on the differences. We'll focus a lot on the leadership that is required to excel and succeed in the workplace. All right, so my own leadership story began more than 20 years ago, when I had the opportunity to first work with people. I mean, looking back, they say we live life forward, but we learn it backwards. I found that looking back, one of the things that provided the foundation for me was because at some point I was able to learn to follow effectively. I became a servant, I became a steward to many of the people that provided leadership to me. And from providing such stewardship, I was able to learn various attributes that I put together to build my own leadership. And like I said earlier, also, personal leadership is key and fundamental and foundational to leadership. And so one of the things I was able to do effectively was eventually learn what was right and lead myself effectively. But again, if I were to look back beyond 20 years ago, the fact that while I was in secondary school, I led the whole school. I was the head boy. In the university, I was president. So I have always had an opportunity to lead at one point or the other. And maybe for things that you would consider natural traits. And like we said earlier, yes, leaders are born, but leaders are also made, because the attributes and the behaviors that make you a leader can actually be learned. All right. So there were things I was born with that made me attractive to people at different levels that made me a leader. But then one thing is, like they say in the 4 boxes of the development, there's the conscious competence and the unconscious competence and all of that. So I was unconsciously competent as a leader, but I was not consciously competent. All right. So moving away from those early years into the work life, I began to try to be conscious of leadership, my leadership competencies, and learn even more. All right. So when I got into my first place of work was MTN. I got into MTN, and I must say, what inspired me to grow leadership was not necessarily the need to impact the world and change the world and impact my circles of influence or my circles of care. Nothing like that. It was simply the fact that I wanted a good life. I wanted a better life. I could see from observation that life was better at the top, and those who were supervisors and managers, they earned more salary, they had official cars, they lived in better apartments, and so I wanted all of that. So my primary motivation for aspiring to leadership was not, first of all, the need to, it was not self-actualization. It was, first of all, the need to conquer my physiological needs, all right, and move, so I grew up the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, so I must confess. So, but that was the starting point, but it did not end there, but to move up the ladder, which is why we are actually having this series, is to move up the ladder, I had to learn, first of all, to be aware of what I had, what were my strengths in leadership, the natural competencies and traits that I had as a leader, or which I had built up over time. And then I had to learn from the leaders that were around me, the things they were doing that stood them out and made them qualified to move up the ranks. All right. And some of those things are what we're going to be talking about today. Now, the interesting thing about that journey was that I moved from being a frontline staff to the back office, and then eventually I became a team lead, and from a team lead, I made supervisor. From being a supervisor, I made manager, and from manager, I moved on to. I asked us to draw our career paths yesterday, our leadership journey, leadership career maps. So I'm sure a lot of you have seen my career map. All right. So I had the opportunity to make all those moves. Yeah, right. And of course, were there mistakes? Yes, you make mistakes at the point where your knowledge ends, when you are at your wit's end in leadership, at any point in leadership, where you are in a point where you don't have enough knowledge, experience, and skill, you will definitely derail or make mistakes. And which is also one of the reasons why you must pick up a very important attitude, which is the attitude towards failure. But if you stretch that too far, then there will not be hope for anybody. And so prisoners cannot come out and become presidents. And we've seen a lot of people come out of prison and become presidents. And I'm not talking about Joseph in the Bible. I'm talking about even the president in Nigeria, and we've seen Nelson Mandela, and everything. And so you can't label people because of a behavioral derail. They are human beings. They only acted to the best of their ability under that circumstance. And the thing about leadership is that leadership, like we'll see later, is always a response to a current situation. And the excellence of leadership is the ability to become so flexible and become what we call a situational leader. I'm sure you all know about it. We'll also look at that later. So I've said all this to say I'd made my own mistakes because of growing with individuals, with business situations and everything. But every time I learned and I got better. But at the same time, I have also had some fantastic milestones. Some of the pictures you see up there, if you start from the right backwards to the left, is actually the series of recognition and award that I got leading people, all right, in a structured organization. And like I said, leading people in a structured organization is different from leading people in the public service, it's different from leading people in the home, it's different from leading people in the church, it's different from leading people, in a community, gathering. So in my own career leadership development, I had a lot of successes. I have nothing but very beautiful memories of my past, providing leadership for people. Now, again, having said that, did everybody I meet along the way clap their hands? Of course not. I remember the first time I was given an opportunity to lead. There were about 4 of us who were in the same team, and the organization needed to choose a team lead. And so we all went for tests and interviews. And of course, there were other people in the team who were more competent, who were more technically competent than I was. But then, and that was one of my first and early lessons in leadership. Remember the triangle that has leadership, technical, that prescribes 3 key competencies: technical, social skills, and then of course the strategic skills, right? So those 3. Now, in our particular case, our leaders were looking at those things, and I was found to be a balance of all 3, right? Which is technical, social, and strategic skills. But the other guys were either skewed to one side or the other. And so at the end of the day, I was picked to lead the team, all right? And of course, that came with increase in salary, increase in so many privileges and everything. And the first leadership crisis or challenge I ever had came from those I competed for that position with. And there were a number of escalations, and at the end of the day, management had to decide to move some of them out of my team so that I can lead effectively. Because of course, I would give assignments, they will rebel, they will refuse to do it. And when I demand accountability, there was a particular case, the guy just replied to my mail when I sent him a query. He just replied to my mail, copied everybody, plus the GM, plus to the highest, and gave me a very nasty response. So he just report. That's when they now called all of us. Says, come, let's talk about this thing. And that's when the decision was made to just move him out of the team, because they knew, they just had to support me to be able to continue. Those are the early days in leadership, and those things happen. And that's why in many organizations like GE and all of that, when they have people in the leadership pipeline and they compete for the CEO position, the moment one person gets the CEO position, they ask the other guys to turn in their resignation, because they know they need to clear the space for the other person to work. And of course, those guys leave and move on to other organizations and do great things. In some cases, they tender their resignation. In other cases, they're asked to do that. Not because he did anything wrong, but because, they are human beings, and that's how life works, and that's how you should be. So, so that was one of my first experience, major challenges, in leadership. And then of course, along the line, leading to the first award I got here, that leading that team was what secured me my first award, which is the one you see with my CEO, standing by my side. This was in Ghana, and the team members got together and nominated me for that award because they thought this guy is fantastic, and it came with a lot of prize money and all of that. Fantastic experience, travel, and everything, and love team and everything, and that was his perspective of my leadership style. But then the same team nominated me for an award that gave me millions of naira or thousands of dollars, as reward money and everything. So it's in leadership, you will not expect everybody to like your style. And there is a reason for that also, which is also in the personality styles and and types that we have and all of that. So certain leaders lead certain people well. There are certain people that you cannot leading in a particular style. And of course, at that level, I was still starting off. So my style would have been skewed, to, one particular personality type, which is more like the go-getter, result-getter type of leader, But then I would have, I've not learned enough of situational leadership where I could switch styles, and so I can carry more people along. So if you think back to America, Donald Trump was an excellent businessman, then comes into government and then loses a good part of Americans. Why? It's simple. It didn't mean that he was not good as a leader in the style. The style he was used to, he was good at it. But then when you begin to assume, when your leadership scope expands, you have, and especially at a national level, you are brought in different type of personalities. And so your ability to switch leadership styles becomes key to winning. But if you stick to one style, you will lose so many, and those people will not be your supporters. They will be your detractors, right? So that can lead to a lot of problems on your leadership journey. And like I said, it doesn't mean you have failed. You just need to go back, reflect, rethink, relearn, and refire. And you'll find out that you will succeed with time. Right. So that's, I think that's all I can share from my leadership story. Eventually, I left being a manager in the same firm, went on to lead a consulting firm, and then eventually went on to start my own consulting firm. And even while working in my own consulting firm, I was seconded a number of times to also lead organizations, as HR director, as, in about 3 different organizations. And in each experience, in each of these stints, I still had to learn new things about leadership, because I led in different situations, and I led in organizations at different situations, and I led with organizations with different type of people, in organizations that are unionized, organizations that are not unionized. All these organizations come with their flavor, and you must adapt your leadership to them as you feel. 3 major tools I learned in the course of growing my leadership is the people management framework. It's a framework that the organization introduced back then to help managers understand the need of their teams. And so it has 4 dimensions called the know me, focus me, guide me, recognize me. And it simply says, look, the staff is yearning. The voice of the employee is that, look, they want you to know them. They want you to focus them. They want you to guide them. And they want you to recognize them. And one of the implications of that tool is that it teaches you how to lead people with different personality types. Essentially, it says that, look, people are different in the workplace, and they all have a common need. And those needs are know me, know who I am, know my strengths, know my weaknesses, and use me according to my strengths, and then help me with my weaknesses, right? And then it says, focus me, which is, look, let me know what you want, clarify for me the expectation, your expectation, and the organization's expectations of me. And it talks about guide me, which is coach me, teach me, tell me, and show me what to do, all right? And don't just tell me and everything. And then recognize me, look, when I do well, when I do good work, recognize me, praise me, reward me, award me, whatever, So it says that every employee has this yearning, and the extent to which you as a leader are able to understand these needs and respond to them appropriately, that is the extent to which you'll be able to lead an engaged and satisfied team. When you fail to discern for the kind of personalities we refer to as ego, what it takes to know them, what it takes to focus them, what it takes to guide them, what it takes to recognize them, you will lose them and they will write you off. Remember what I said about my team members and how one, revolted, right? That happens when you fail to understand them. But while each of these personality types have these needs in common, they all have different ways of expressing it. And they all have different expectations about how those needs ought to be met. So as a line manager, when you are not familiar with those techniques, you will derail, you will have issues, you will run into challenges, you will hit the rock with them. Now, let me try and illustrate. If you have used a Mac and also a Windows PC, you will agree with me that the way you open and operate a window in Mac is different from the way you open and operate a window or an application in a Windows PC, a Microsoft Windows PC. Now, if you attempt to run a Mac, like, let's assume that you've been used to, maybe for the last 5 years, 10 years, you trained on Windows, everything on Windows, and then suddenly somebody gives you a new Mac, and then you open your Mac, and for the first time you entered into your Mac, you attempted to log in and run an application like you ran it on Windows. Do you think you'll be successful? The answer is no. Why? Because the OS of the Mac is completely different from the OS, the operating system in the Windows. So what must you do? You, and not the Mac, will be required to go and learn how the Mac works. You have to change your skills. You have to change your approach. You have to change your attitude. You have to change your mindset in order to work with a Mac. So the PC did not change, but you, the user, had to change. That is how it is with people. Now, I will say there are 4 different types of people in the workplace. Now, if you don't know how to use them with their different OS, or with their different character and personalities and everything, then you will fail as a leader. And naturally, you will blame the people, but the truth is that you will be expected to have made the necessary adjustment to all the people. And so, if you look back to the American case, I said we use those examples from time to time. President Trump was blamed for not being able to unify America. And like I said, there was nothing wrong. He was having fantastic results and everything, but he was just not able to carry all of them together. And that is critical to national leadership, because at that level, everybody plus the LGBT plus the Satanists plus they're all your people. They're all your children. You will have to learn and carry them along. And the same things applies to corporate leadership. You have to learn the various generations of people in the workplace. I mean, remember when we talk about generation of people, the baby boomers and the generation Y and everything. You have to learn their characteristics, and that's why that knowledge is important. And learn to manage them the way they are. If you try to manage the Y generation like you manage baby boomers, you will run into problems. If you have the authority and nobody's watching, yes, you can sack them all you want. But if you get into a multinational where everybody's individuality and diversity is respected, then you will be the one that will be kicked out. So these are toolkits that you must pick up. How do I know you? How do I focus you? How do I guide you? And how do I recognize you? These are key. You must understand how people want to be known, focused, guided, and recognized. If you're going to be successful as a leader or as a manager at every level, else you keep running into trouble. Now, at the beginning of your leadership, if you're in a good organization, people would understand and tolerate you. But as you go up, they'll begin to expect that you as the leader too need to change. Because every time you move to a team, the news is that you have fired everybody and you've replaced them. with the type of people that are like you. Then you move to the next thing again, you fire everybody and you replace them. Very soon, management will start getting worried about you because maybe some of the people you are firing are people who are bringing in very good, meeting their target or exceeding their targets, who are related to some key people in the board or in government that maybe the leaders hired, for political reasons. And then they are now needing to tolerate. No. At some point, they will have to make a decision whether they want to retain some of those key staff or whether they want to retain you, and you don't want that to happen to you. All right. I remember I was speaking to a cousin of mine who is a pilot. He's a helicopter pilot. And he told me something that is also very important and related to this. He said, do you know that if you are, as a pilot, you are trained to fly a particular helicopter. If you are ever going to fly another type of helicopter, then you have to go back to training school and learn about that helicopter and then come and operate it. Can you beat that? So they are all helicopters, but not all helicopters are the same. They are all Boeing, but not all Boeing are the same. So if you are going to stop or you're going to move from flying this Boeing to another Boeing, you have to go back to school and learn about the new Boeing. And that is key. That is exactly what is required of us as leaders. The people are computers. The people are the various Boeings. They can fly. They are as good as the leaders can fly them. So that is why we say leadership, managing is not easy. Because you have all these various type of human beings and you are the one who has to change. And so when leaders get paid bigger salaries and given bigger privileges and people get envious, I tell them, you don't understand. It's a big responsibility. So it's not about the title, it's not about authority, and if you learn to live that way, then you missed it already completely. All right. It is the fact that you have a lot of work to do in order to carry everybody along. Right? So I had to learn. My first lessons in leadership were around the people management framework. I had to learn to manage people, understand the various type of people in the workplace, understood how to hear and discern the voice of know me, focus me, guide me, recognize me, and understand how to respond to them. It was very, very critical. And my first award from the story I shared earlier was actually as a result of managing people. Sorry, the last award. So if you see the one on the right, it was as a result of being able to manage people along that framework. All right. I was the first recipient of that award, one of the first recipients of that award. It was a CEO award for managers. And I was one of the first recipients because I did this very, very well. Now, the second key of two key that I learned. Now, again, I'm not going to the details of these things. We have a course on it, complete course on it. So, but there's no time to go into all of that. But I'm just going to give you highlights and make you see why it's important. Now, the second tool I learned that was so important to my success was the Ken Blanchard's toolkit. All right, he called it the situational leadership. All right, and in situational leadership, right. I think I should be leaving these slides now.